It's great to be here. I was really delighted to be invited to talk to you today. Though I wish I were really with you in beautiful Oslo. I visited briefly only once and looked forward to renewing that brief acquaintance back in March. But I'm still very glad to be here in this way now. So thank you to NORLA, Innovation Norway, and the Norwegian Ministry of Culture for this invitation to talk, and to Yannick and Van der Veer for all her help along the way, plus the great technical support which makes all of this possible. I hope I'll be able to meet more of you in real life in the not too distant future. Being asked to tell you a bit more about UK agenting, including my own publishing path, has sent me wandering a quarter century back. Not quite the dim and distant past, since it feels like a very vivid yesterday when I fell out of love with academia and into the very warm heart of the book trade, into the making, not the dissecting of books. I started at Blake Friedmann exactly 25 years ago last week as the late, great Carol Blake's assistant, and have never had a boring day at the office ever since. Agenting is a long game, and a good author-agent relationship can be one of the most enduring across all the sectors of the industry. Though I'm very sad that Carol is no longer with us, I'm very proud to now be MD of the agency she co-founded, and privileged to represent her authors like Joseph O'Connor and Peter James, as well as many new writers I've signed along the way, including some of my home country, South Africa's finest writers, like Man Booker International shortlister Marlene van Niekerk, the inimitable Zeig Sanda, king of crime fiction Deon Meyer, journalist and political commentator Sisonke Misimang, and novelist and activist Ahmad Tangor, who sadly died this month. Among those, Deon and Marlene write in Afrikaans, and I think you know that I have a particular passion for sharing writers from South Africa in all languages, but I'm fluent in Afrikaans and can translate, so I had a little bit of a special niche ready for me early on. And in fact, several of those authors have had some publishing attention in Norway, but all of them should be better known. And in fact, I should have been at the Gothenburg Book Fair this weekend with Marlene, Deon and Sisonke as guests for a special South African market focus there. But of course, all of that has changed, and I hope it might still happen next year. But back in 1995, I sold serial, audio, short stories and translation rights from the very start. And a few weeks only after joining was pitching books at my first Frankfurt Book Fair, where I discovered an exhilarating community of global bibliophiles and of course met several eloquent and erudite Norwegian publishers for the first time. I was totally hooked on the thrill of agenting from the get-go, as I still am, even when, as now, we have to do it without book fairs as we knew them, and without the real and often audible buzz of connecting with publishers and other agents in person. I am so glad that Norway had its Frankfurt market focus opportunity last year, and I'm sad not to be preparing to head to Germany now. But beyond that comradely hubbub of a Buchmesse, the meetings, the parties, the late night conversations in the sadly soon to shut down Hessische Hof, or indeed on the dance floor, those serendipitous conversations that turn into a shared book. I also love, as I'm sure many of you do too, the other extreme of agenting, those quiet moments, often early morning or in the midnight hours, alone at your desk with a manuscript, a story on the page or the screen, reading and readying to sell and share with the world. We love agenting because of the multivalent variety the work offers, that it is a business of extremes with so many different kinds of concentration and communication, with the manuscript page, with the author and their blossoming ideas, with the publishers, persuading, negotiating, berating, and more, with every single clause of a publishing contract or line of a royalty statement. So here we are, a convocation of agents, or should I say editors, cheerleaders, midwives, bodyguards, psychologists, strategists, and much, much more. I've also been called much worse things than that in my agenting career, because you can't do a good job for your clients and be loved by everybody. So this strange hybrid, sometimes invisible in-between creature we call an agent is a role that few outside the industry really understand. And when I first applied for jobs in London, initially to be an editorial assistant, in spite of a degree in English literature, I didn't know that agents even existed or anything of the role they played in the business of books. AP Watt, said to be the world's first established literary agency, was founded in 1895. But in many countries, including Norway, I know, literary agenting as a profession is a fairly recent development. But long may our fine profession flourish and grow. As a sign of that growth internationally, on the Friday of Frankfurt Book Fair Week, now virtual Frankfurt Book Fair Week, there will be an online meeting of international agents associations, including agents from countries which don't yet have a formal association, but might want to form one. I'd be very happy to share details about that after this. I believe passionately in agents' advocacy of authors' work, protecting their ability to make a good living from their creative endeavors. And I believe agents have never been more crucial than now, at a time when not just authors' incomes, but also the very principle of copyright is under threat worldwide. The UK's Association of Authors Agents, the AAA, of which I am president, has over 100 agency member companies, ranging from solo agents through to large corporates like Curtis Brown. My own agency would be considered medium-sized at just over a dozen staff members, which includes agents, assistants, a contracts and finance manager, 2 translation rights colleagues, and film and TV agents. And incidentally, my wonderful contract manager colleague, Anne Grøteig, who started with us in the early days of lockdown, worked with NORLA and with some of you here and sends you her warm regards. We're very lucky to now have her with us. The AAA is seeing swift growth this year, partly due to the impact of COVID-19 and more agents wanting networking support and access to more shared expertise in this challenging and rapidly changing environment. We offer our members sessions on questions of best practice, subjects like the handling of estates or accessing funding for authors. Though, of course, our UK competition law means that as a trade association, we can't act as a cartel and are not allowed to enter into direct collective bargaining with publishers or joint discussion of terms. While there are recognized principles and some industry norms, contractual precedents with publishers, unlike with you, can vary greatly between agencies and also between individual authors. So there is much to negotiate over, not just in the UK, but in the deals we do all over the world in every possible language and format. When I sell rights to British publishers, we tend to sell UK and traditional historic British Commonwealth markets, excluding Canada, and then North American rights separately to publishers the other side of the Atlantic, retaining film and TV, theatre, merchandising, translation rights, and many other sub-rights like radio, and especially audio, where it's possible to sell directly to audio publishers on the author's behalf. I've done many deals separately in Australia, Canada, and South Africa, of course, as well. And as Carol said to me when explaining rights in my job interview, she would have sold separate rights to Tooting High Street if that were possible. The bookseller has just reported on a rather glorious auction I recently held for Scottish writer Graham McCrae Burnett's new novel, Case Study, which in the end, despite several corporate publishers offering 2, was sold to a trio of indies, to Saraband, who had published his first 3 books in the UK, to Text in Australia, and a record-level deal for audio rights separately to Belinda. I can think of only a couple of occasions in which I've sold world rights, all languages, to the publisher, and that was on a very specific kind of book. They have to be very compelling reasons, both financial and strategic, for us to do so. When asked what I feel equipped me to be an agent, I say often that it helped to come from a very large and argumentative family, where I always had to fight my corner against my sisters. I have 4 sisters, I'm number 4. But apart from negotiating skill and tenacity, which can be learned, and a deep love of story and storytelling, I would say it requires diplomacy, resilience, flexibility, and persistence. Also, a particular kind of dogged optimism. We're always driving forward, working on books in the making and those that are scheduled years ahead, and also believing in every neglected masterpiece whose genius is still to be fully recognized. And I'm sure many of you have stories of that book that you sent out 40 times or to 40 different publishers or over many different years before you finally got a deal and the book found its readership. But taking a brisk scan back over my 2.5 decades of agenting, it's remarkable how much has actually changed in the nuts and bolts of the industry. I don't just mean the end of legendary long lunches, a time without a mobile phone to hand, nor even email back in the office. When I started, we still sent faxes, and the office computer ran MS-DOS, green text on a black screen. Remember that? And no Windows with a capital W. I know your industry and Norwegian writers and readers benefit from fixed book prices, but within weeks of my starting at Blake Friedmann, though this was not my fault, Britain's fixed price net book agreement collapsed, bringing in our long lacerating price wars and the very deep discounting that has contributed to reductions in authors' earnings over the years. And that is an entire talk in itself, but for another day. We were arguing back then endlessly over mechanical reproduction rights clauses in contracts, long before the first clunky, gigantic ebook readers came in. But I'm sure we all remember when suddenly a properly portable Kindle came out and changed the landscape completely. That Kindle Christmas, as we called it in the UK. And of course, our negotiations and royalties have had to evolve in tandem, though of course, I don't think the royalty levels for authors have yet evolved far enough. We've also seen the rise of Amazon from its long loss leader years to the immensely efficient delivery service and troubling global behemoth it is now. And more recently, the transitions from cassette tapes, then CDs to digital, have made audio the fastest growing area in the UK trade. Though interestingly, audio didn't rise as much as was initially expected during the COVID shutdown, though of course ebooks did. Now we have to consider the impact of subscription models, all you can eat or otherwise, and how author remuneration levels again need to be adapted. The fight goes on. Carol Blake wrote an excellent book from pitch to publication that is practically a Bible for many in the book trade. I'm tasked with updating the next edition, and these immense and swift changes across publishing formats, online platforms, and delivery routes to customers will make for some interesting additions in due course. This year, COVID-19 and lockdown handed huge profits and book sales to supermarkets. The only physical bookstores actually sell, well, only physical stores then actually selling books during the lockdown time, and to the big A, of course. But it also meant that retailers like Waterstones were compelled to up their online game too. And on the subject of online retailers, we're looking forward to seeing how bookstore.org fares as it comes to our shores from the US now, with the aim of strongly supporting independent bookselling online. On the positive side, The last 2 years have seen massive growth in book-to-screen adaptations, with the SVODs, streaming video on demand, like Apple TV and Netflix, creating greater appetite for content internationally. And the figures show that films and plays in the UK based on books make significantly more at the box office than originally written scripts. For all its obstacles, 2020 has already proved a bumper year for book-to-film option sales for my own agency. And other screens loom large this year as we all Zoom our days away. Even authors who had done very little online before have over these months adapted to doing Facebook Lives, Instagram Lives, and lots of Zoom launches and other platforms too. As the AAA, we've held webinars for our agency members, including about online PR campaigns. While in my other life as a poet, I've taken part in and enjoyed many fascinating and energizing Zoom readings with writers and poets in the US, Australia, South Africa, Nigeria, and more. So one of the advantages is that these virtual events have become more accessible to a wider audience, though we miss the social element, the human touch, and live voices. It's wonderful that we do have the technology at our disposal, and that more people who have issues with travel due to cost, disability, or caring responsibilities can now attend events around the country and indeed around the world. Though one should not forget that many people suffer from digital poverty too in many very unequal societies. In the future, we will continue to see more innovation and hybrid and blended events from festivals, publishers, and booksellers. Though we will need to work out ways to ensure that there is a better income stream and book sales incentives to increase the rewards for writers and event organizers too. The publishing trade has shown great agility and resilience, and an increased and generous level of collaboration in the UK this year, making me even prouder to be part of this brilliant industry. Via the AAA, I talk regularly with heads of the Publishers and Booksellers Association, the Society of Authors, library services, and collecting societies. Part of my role is also lobbying on issues, and goodness, what a lot of thorny issues there are now. This year has seen success for the campaign to remove VAT from ebooks, though it remains on audiobooks, but other concerns loom large. The chaos of Brexit, of course, and the question of ensuring that the status of our strong copyright regime is not bargained away in fraught free trade agreements is bad enough. But of course, coronavirus has added a whole new dimension to the landscape. In addition to questions of business survival at base, we need to continue to be extra vigilant against piracy and other intellectual property incursions, and campaign constantly for creators' rights to be recognized so that writers and therefore agents can remain properly protected and remunerated. This especially in a world where there is a lot of ignorance about copyright and the ways that authors earn or don't earn, and how widely sharing, otherwise known as piracy, really damages the industry and the people who create the stories in the first place. It's not just about protecting the excellent British copyright regime and our authors. We are at a crucial and dynamic moment for considering the very structure of the workplace, who we employ, what and how we publish. Diversity and inclusivity questions have been part of our trade concerns, discussions and actions for some time. But coronavirus, the murder of George Floyd, and the Black Lives Matter movement further galvanized and intensified this. Over the last couple of years at the AAA, we've put together an extensive resource guide for members on building an inclusive workplace, And my agency's own Carol Blake Open Doors project is one of the many company schemes seeking to bring about positive change in the book trade's representation. This too is a subject for days, not minutes, but I'd love to hear more from any of you later in this area as well. Across the book trade, we campaign thus for all parts of the ecology that sustain our author creators, the survival of indie bookstores, libraries, literacy, the environment. Everything is interconnected, and everything boils down to the book in the end. It's vital to keep that and the creator of those stories, the author, at the heart of all that we do. Ian Forster's famous phrase, "only connect," is a touchstone for me. And as agents, that is what we are supremely good at, consistently connecting and communicating, but always with the author at the center. In these ongoing days of uncertainty, with feelings of stuckness, often of isolation, I'm grateful that, as the poet Emily Dickinson wrote, there is no frigate like a book to take you lands away. We will always travel and open up worlds with our advocacy of our authors and the sharing of their stories. And I wish you well in all your many journeys with the writers whose work you represent.